Rob, alcoholic. I just wouldn't mind starting and just by thanking the committee for putting this on. I think it's a wonderful event. I think it's a great place to hold something like this, and well done. You know, you deserve a round of applause for all the work you guys do. I just want to start the session with a prayer. It's a prayer that I heard a lot of years ago that pretty much I like to hear every now and then. It says, God, today help me set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about my own recovery, so I may have an open mind and new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Amen. Yeah, well, the bar's been set pretty high by Colleen, you know, and so it's. I'll try not bring it down too low, but I'll try and do my best up here and carry some sort of message. It's something that, when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll start right at the end. I was at a meeting once, and I heard a lady say, I don't know where I'm going to begin. And a bloke yelled out, why don't you try starting at the end? So I'll start at the end, and I'll start 6 weeks sober, because I don't think anyone, when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't think anyone's got any understanding of our inventory process, of any of our step work. And it's something when I come into AA, then I start to grasp that. And I know people go on different journeys, people bounce in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous before they find a sponsor. People are around for long periods of time. All different sorts of... Chris said it, you know, we're all different. And we all find our own way, and when we find our own way, we do. When we hear, we're meant to hear, we hear. And, you know, I was 6 weeks sober in 98. My sobriety date's the 11th of February, 1998. My home group's the Adelaide Big Book Study in South Australia on a Monday night at 6:30. Everyone's most welcome if you're ever in Adelaide. And yeah, I was 6 weeks sober at a meeting. I'd been bounced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't stand the way I felt without a drink in me anymore. An old-time member walked past me and he goes, how you going, Rob? And it was a lot of like, just keep coming back, don't take the first drink. And I was nuts. I was really struggling. The part Colleen spoke about, that ferret in the mind, had me convinced that death was the best option. And I didn't realise how close I was at the time to leave and not being here today. I really didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't know what to do. I was in that meeting and I just couldn't drink anymore because I couldn't stand waking up not remembering the shame and guilt and the remorse I felt and the terrible feelings I had within me, though. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't live with it without alcohol, and I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what was wrong with me, how dark it is before the dawn. There was a member at the meeting and he got called to speak, and halfway through that meeting he stood up and he spoke about that insanity to drink against his own will, that mental obsession and the phenomenon of craving, the allergy, the abnormal reaction that alcoholics have. And he spoke about the insanity that we suffer from, what we need to be restored to. He spoke about what his will in his life was. He spoke about God-given instincts and an inventory process that I'd never heard before in a meeting of AA, in an ID meeting back then in Adelaide. It was almost like a criminal offence to share that stuff. I noticed that half the meeting got up and walked out. And at the end of that meeting, people were trying to keep me away from him because we were talking, and we sat out there till 1 o'clock that night, and we at the front of the hospital meeting, and he drew me the step one cycle, stage by stage by stage, straight out of the doctor's opinion. And we went over, and I learned that I'm that abnormal drinker. I can't control the amount and guarantee my behaviour when I drink. And it was progressing in me, and I also learned what the loss of choice. You know, and I knew I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop picking it up. But I didn't realise, like a lot of people do, I didn't realise I was sick. I thought I was just weak, inadequate, a coward. I didn't know that I was in this obsession that was out to kill me. It was going to take me out, and it almost had me. And I realised that loss of choice for me is when I can't bring into my consciousness what happened a week or a month ago, or the consequences of what's going to happen when I take a drink, and that insanity wins out, and I'll pick a drink up and I'll put it in my system, and it'll trigger that craving again, and I'll go on a spree, and I'll emerge remorseful from that spree with a lot of fear, guilt and shame, and I'll become restless, irritable and discontented, and dealing with everything else that's happening in my life at the time. My life was burnt to the ground. I had nothing. I owed a lot of money, and I didn't know what to do, and And I sat out there outside of this meeting. It was a great time for me. It sounds terrible, and it's like the worst possible scenario that could happen in my life had happened. I look back years later, that was the best place for me to be in. I could hear. I had nothing. I had nothing that could stop me from getting that time in my life, back in 98. And it started an amazing journey for me. And I came to believe in him, that member. I had no religious upbringing, and my religious upbringing was on a Sunday morning, and Christian people would come around our house and they'd knock on the door, and my parents would say to all us kids, "Don't anybody answer that door." You know what I mean? That's about the only... It was a fairy tale for me. God was a fairy tale. I didn't know anything different. I didn't know about spiritual principles, or... It was very foreign for me. Standing out the front of meetings was very foreign. I was totally ashamed. What Colleen said, it's about finding your voice in Alcoholics Anonymous and in the world out there, in meetings at work, amongst family members, amongst life, and being able to engage with people without asserting yourself, without resentment and fear. Have that normal emotional security. That's why I drank. I drank to feel that, so I could say things to people and not feel nothing. So I didn't take things away with me and replay and re-feel and relive things over and over and over. I believe the fears in my mind that'll tell me you're no good. You ever sat there in the morning and you've got the story going on about what's going to happen in the day, what's going to happen at that meeting, what's happening, and you realise you're just sitting there by yourself and no one's even in the room with you, in your own voice and your own thoughts and your own mind. Our literature says fear ought to be classed with stealing. I can see why. If I let it, it'll take away my friendships. It'll take away my place in Alcoholics Anonymous. It'll take away my wife. It'll take away my job. It'll take everything that's good in my life, and that's what it wants to do. And leave me with nothing and alone, and that obsession will come back, and I'll be, in that depth of it again. And I never want to go back. That's why I'm so grateful to people who put these things on and be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we had a convention recently in Adelaide. It was great. It's great to be a part of these sort of things. You get a chance to meet a lot of nice people. I know a lot of some people here I know really well, and I love very dearly over the years that I've met in AA. And yeah, AA is a beautiful thing, and it just gives us that treatment that settles me down enough so I can get out of myself enough so I don't need to take a drink of alcohol anymore for today, quietens my mind enough so I don't have to listen to the story of what's going on. I like the ferret. I've never heard that before, like the ferret going on in my mind, Back to 98, we sat outside this meeting and we read through the doctor's opinion, and he was actually from a member from the Triangle Group in Melbourne. He was a friend of Chris's. Years later, we recognised our friends, and when I got to know Chris and Mandy, and we sat outside that meeting, and he became my first sponsor, and we sat down. He was there. He wasn't working. I wasn't working. I had a lot of money. I was ducking and weaving from everyone. We just had time. We read through the first part of the big book. It was great. I loved every minute of it. He explained stuff I'd never heard before. All the stories and more about alcoholism, about Jim and Fred, and the person that can't drink for 25 years and out come the carpet slippers and bottle. And I recognise that with sometimes members within Alcoholics Anonymous. That insanity can come on people at any time. Sometimes people sit there for a long period of time, and that's okay too. It's not up for anyone to tell them they can't. And we got to We Agnostics, and I didn't never liked We Agnostics because the God thing, and he explained to me, took me to pages 46 and 47 in there, because I didn't know. I looked at God as we understood him. As I told you, I didn't have any understanding of God. And he said, Rob, you can have your own conception of God. And it opened the door for me enough to be able to keep pushing on. And then the thing that impressed me when I heard him share that night what his will in his life was, his thinking and his actions towards his God-given instincts, the resentments, fears, and his conduct. And I relate to that stuff when I'm not drinking. I was 6 weeks sober at the time, and I knew that. I was in deep resentment with people. I had a lot of unresolved conflict. I was reliving and replaying incidents that people did to me. I had a lot of fear constantly going on within my mind. It was just a daily struggle to stay alive at that time. So, and we sat there and we did as Colleen said, the Step Street prayer. We got on our knees, and I just followed everything he said. I didn't know what was going to happen. I used to sit in AA when I heard people talk about the steps early on. I thought, here we go, Jesus Christ and ginger ales, you know what? This is where it's going to go. You know, they said they had spiritual awakenings, and I thought, my God, I'll end up in that Salvation Army band around the corner as the drummer or something like that. Is that what happens when you turn spiritual? You know, no disrespect meant to anyone that does that in here. I got this thing where I told Chris, no jokes today. My jokes go down like a lead balloon in the middle of the room, eh? And no one laughs, and I'm like a deer in the headlights, you know. Like, and but yeah, you know, like you know, and he explained all these things to me that with our God-given instincts, and there's stuff you guys know. I wouldn't have I didn't have a clue. How do you know when you don't know? I didn't know. And he explained the importance of it, though. And he explained the importance of doing a thorough four-step inventory, dealing with our resentments, our fears, and our conduct. And we sat there and we got to that part of the book, and in there it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. I think it says we listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. And he said, we're going to do this one column at a time. And we're going to start, and then it got to the instincts. Usually it's affected your self-esteem, personal relationship. Bill Wilson uses words that were written in the 30s. My sponsor said to me, he goes, Rob, you know, material financial security. We went through all the dictionary meanings of it, self-esteem, what we think of ourselves, high or low, and all this pride and justified or excessive opinion of oneself, either self-love or self-hate, generally what we think people think of us. Emotional security, those tend to dominate, or there's those that are emotionally insecure. They're totally dependent upon everyone. I identify with that. I was totally dependent on you guys. I was totally dependent on people to tell me what I wanted to hear to boost my own self-esteem and pride and get my own way. When they didn't, I can remember ringing my mum and dad up and I needed cash. I was in a jam. I was stuck. I had nowhere to live. It was their fault. My mum was an alcoholic. I watched their family. There was 10 brothers and sisters. There was heaps of alcoholism in there. I blamed her for everything that was happening in my life. Money. I need cash. I've got nowhere to go. We can't get it to you, Rob. Mate, it welled up within me. I need cash. Don't you love your son? You know, like all this sorts of, it's your fault I'm like this. And that's you guys relate to that because it's so true. It's blame, you know. Like, I didn't know that. And then, of course, I hang up, swearing and carrying on. And, you know, that's the sort of sickness I was in at the end, and totally reliant on the system, unable to work, unable to function, unable to be around people with the mind I had. I couldn't last a couple of hours, and I think people were judging me, or they knew what happened the other night, or the guilt and shame, some of the crap I was doing when I was drinking, and the way I felt. My God, I was at my first AA meeting, my jeans were still soaked in the urine stains, you know, like, that's where I was at. And you know, like, it's not a pretty picture to paint people, you know, like to, and you know, like, I remember a lady walked up to me at a meeting I was first in, and she goes, Rob, you've made it back. You've made it. And I was thinking, made it? My life's in the toilet. Don't you love when AA people say that stuff? You know, I'm thinking, my life's in ruin. Made what? And she made Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, like, I think, I'll just tell a quick story. I said to Chris I wouldn't, but I will. The other day, me and Chris have got the same sponsor. He's a great bloke. I love Bob D from Vegas. He's a champion. He's just a really nice guy. I'm speaking to Bob, and I'm currently National PI, Public Information and Cooperation Professionals, and the Community Coordinator in Australia. And I said to him, my time's up at the start of January. I finished the role, and I said, you know, we're talking about what do you want to do, and rah. And I said, I'm not sure, you know, like there's a few things open. And he goes, why don't you just wait, and when they ask you, say, listen, that might interfere with my job. I'll just wait to be king. And I lost it, you know. Sometimes I'm coming home from work, and I'm ringing, because I went shift work in Adelaide, and I'm ringing Bob, I'm talking to him, and I'm just in tears, man. I've got tears rolling down my face. I think he knows me well enough, because he knows himself, that I just need that. I need that laughter. I need to not take myself so seriously, or it gets too much. It's just still to today. You know, it's still to today. I need the daily, on awakening as we go through the day when we retire at night. I need that stuff. I need this. I need the inventory process. You know, and after we talked about instincts, and back in '98, I looked at the first 3 columns and I looked at it and I thought, yeah, they hurt me really bad, some of these people. You know, my mum wouldn't lend me money. You know, my mum doesn't love me. My mum, I got alcoholism from her. My mum, her family's sick. My mum, look at, you know. Imagine God sometimes, you know, like you know, they've done this, they've done that, they've done this, done that, Imagine God, he goes to talk back and don't hang it up. Because that was me. It still can be, you know. It's my problems, my stuff. You know, literature says selfishness, self-centered, driven by 100 forms of fear. You know, that's me. And I had this 3 column. I had a massive inventory. I'm ashamed of it now. Just the way I was at the time. I was a drug dealer in my late teens. I needed money. I didn't want to work. I needed to drink. I didn't want to be around people. I was getting to that abnormal place where that's the only people I wanted to associate with, and I just felt comfortable around. Being around normal people was not comfortable for me, you know. It just you don't recognise that at the time, and you put this facade on some sort of tough guy, and I was a coward. That's just the truth of it, you know. And yeah, we looked at all this inventory, and he said to me, I rang him up. He showed me how to do it, the 4th column, and where you look for your own wrong in the matter, and where you're selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened. And you know, it says in there, I think it says, you know, not your fault. That's not all your fault. We disregard the other person entirely. We try and look for our own wrong in the matter. That's hard, man, with some of it. You know, there's a little prayer in there. We ask God to show us tolerance, pity, and patience. Us, tolerance, pity, and patience towards them. It's the prayer I still use today. And yeah, I started on that and I ran through it. And he said, Rob, also write all your harms, whatever you've done to the people, any money you owe them, and go through and just write it all out in the 4th column. And I did. And I had nothing to do at the time, so I just went and done it. I just went through. I had a lot of resentment there. And he said one thing, he goes, notice that the word fear is bracketed along each resentment. He goes, what I want you to do, I want you to write what you're frightened of. You know, and I started to look at, you know, people rejected me. I was resenting them because that's my fear of rejection. I was a kid at school. I didn't like the kid that always put his hand up. I thought he was a smart ass, that always answered the questions. It's my fear of failure that resentment's driven by. People criticised me, judged me. I can remember this old guy. I was 25 years old, and I'd lost it, and I was rocking up at his hotel, and I'd borrowed money off him. I had no recollection of it, and I come out of a blackout, and I was sitting at the bar, you know, and there's a girl I went to school with. She's running around spraying me with Impulse because I must have just stunk. And he's having a go at me, saying, "What the hell are you doing here, mate?" And I'm like, I almost fell off my chair. I go, "Who I am, man? You know, urine-stained jeans. You know, like people were horrified sitting in there. I was wondering why people were looking at me. And I realised that he told me the truth. And I resented him, and that resentment was driven by my fear of the truth. It had nothing to do with what he was saying. I didn't have any discernment of that between criticism, judgment, truth. I didn't have a middle ground for that. It was all, if anyone said something to me, bang, I took it personally to heart, whether it was truth or criticism. I didn't know the difference. You know, I was in that place where I was relying on, totally dependent on people to tell me what I wanted to hear. And I was spiritually sick, our literature says. Spiritual malady. You know, Colleen said it, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. I finally finished that inventory, and I was 6 weeks sober, 7 weeks sober, and people in AA were, at the time, you know, 1 step a year. You know, it's just good to be here, you know, to hear people share about our program and that, because it was 1 step a year, just keep coming back, you know, you got time. Some of us haven't got time. Some people have, don't get me wrong, some people have got time. They can sit in AA and, you know, like our literature's pretty clear though. People that can still have the power to choose and not live on a non-spiritual way of life, haven't probably got the obsession to drink alcohol. Our literature says that. People that this book's not going to appeal to, they're not going. If you, as I said, I sponsor a few people too, and if they don't want to do this, I would say, don't do it. Why would you? Who wants to come to believe in a power greater than themselves? Who wants to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, really? Who wants to do an inventory? Who wants to share with someone your deepest, darkest crannies of the past, our literature says? Who wants to talk about your sex conduct, your conduct in life? I certainly didn't. Who wants to go back and pay money that you owe that you got away with? Not a chance. I owed heaps of coin. I thought fresh start. I was racked at a meeting. An old time member said, "Just keep coming back. Don't take the first drink." I thought, beauty. You know, that's all I need to do. And that's just, you know, you sit there and you're thinking, who wants to do moral inventory? Who wants to pray and meditate? My God, are we going to become monks? You know, who wants to take the time that it takes to sit with someone across the table in your house to show them this literature program? Only the people that are dying will do that. And I was dying. That's why I grabbed it. And we got through my resentments, and finally, and I had all my fears. I went through and listed all my fears, and he said, put them on another sheet of paper. And then all your harms, put them on another sheet of paper. And we talked about stuff and fear, and you know, fears ruled my life, and even in recovery, it talks about, you know, the fear, you know, false evidence appearing real. It just is the boogeyman for us. It just is one of the defects of Karen. I promised Tony I won't go into steps 6 and 7 too much, so I'll be really careful. Usually I'm a bit of a shooter from the hip when I'm sharing. Anything could come out, you know. So, and fear, you know, like it's. I sometimes ring my sponsor to today, you know, and he goes, "Rob, you know," I said, "I've got a bit of fear about this and that work. I trained up all this stuff." And I said, "They're going to cut me. They're going to cut me." He goes, "Why? Has anyone said anything?" I said, "Nah." He goes, "Your head ever lied to you before?" And I'm thinking, every day, you know. And he's like, and it's trust. It's trust. I went through this process, and I've finished talking about the process, and I went through it, and a spiritual experience, and the obsession to drink was relieved from me. And I got faith that this would work. That's why I sponsor people. That's why I feel honoured to come here and talk about this. I really do feel honoured. But trust is a different thing for me. To trust that it's going to look after me no matter what. Trust that no matter where I go in this world, it will have my back. Trust that you guys can understand, you know, like it's a big difference for me as faith and trust. It's something that I have to keep working at on a daily basis to not listen to that fear that it will tell me, you know, like this is going to go bad. This is not going to. You can't do that, man. You won't be able to, you know, like, and to slowly continue to walk through it over a long period of time. And when I listed all my fears and I had a look at my fears, you know, you can see it in there. I can see it today. If I believe it, my fears will take away my job, material financial security. My fears will take away my relationship. She's having an affair. I'll start believing stuff that ain't real. It'll take away you guys. You shouldn't be doing this, Rob. You know, like you shouldn't be in AA. You know, it's just you believe it. You know, I always come back to AA. I'm a daily sort of person because of the service side of things and the sponsorship. So I get that. I love the feeling I get from here. I love the feeling when I'm working with people. I love the feeling when I'm doing service for Alcoholics Anonymous. I get a chance to give back because I've been given a lot. And then I got to a conduct inventory. And, you know, like, it says sex conduct in the book. I'm not here to say what people should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. I know how I am today. If I'm at work or I'm in a meeting, I'm around people, if I get filled with fear and I believe someone's judging me something, my behaviour, my conduct around people is different. I internalise stuff. I'll leave. I won't say nothing to anyone. You know, I had good sponsorship early on where he knew he was the same. He was one of those people that just had to drink to shut his head off, and I just imagined him being in a bad way too when he got in. He talked to me about this stuff, conduct inventories, and when I wrote it all out, he said, just list all your harms, Rob, as well, and we'll have a look at the whole lot. And he pointed me to, I think it's page 50 in the 12 and 12. And for those that are new, or those that are learning, or people that are looking at this, 17 of the 12 and 12 says the 12 and 12 was written to broaden and deepen the understanding of the steps as they're first written in our Big Book Literature program, to add to, and that's what we sort of did a bit of early on. Then later on, I did a lot more with him after my mind cleared a bit, and I started sponsoring people myself. And it talks in there about our conduct for the rest of our life in the areas of money, security, sex relations. So I listed all my conduct. And I still, I revisited it 9 years sober. I had to look at it again, and my sex conduct again, and relationship I was in, and my motives behind it. And, the trouble with me, when I'm in any sort of emotional disturbance, or I'm looking out and not looking within, my conduct's not right. My behaviour around other people, because I sometimes I work with, I'm lucky enough I've had ladies ask me for help, and I get a chance to take them through the book. Some people I sponsor, they've never done no harm to anyone. Yeah. We get to the conduct and the harms list, they haven't done the stuff I did. I can't expect them to say, I already haven't done this. That's not the way it is. I watch people drink themselves to death, mate, that never done anything for anyone. Like I watched my uncle do that. I didn't see him do much. He was 42 years old. His nervous system broke down. He had peripheral neuritis. He had chronic alcoholism. So I think it's important for me to... And I got made really aware of that early on when I was going to meetings. And, after I had an experience with this program, and we sat there and we talked about a lot of stuff, and we got to the fifth step, and I would never have done a fifth step with him if he hadn't shared his worst items in stock with me. At Steps 3, when he explained God-given instincts, he talked about all his stuff. He talked about his conduct in all areas of his life. He shared everything openly with me. I got big identification. I didn't get identification at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. People were talking about drinking and blackout stories and this and that. I'd get up to and, add a few stories, and we all can do it. But he shared the stuff that's embarrassing, the stuff that you don't want to share with anyone. So I got to step 5, and I just opened up with him, and we went over everything. And more light shines through 2 windows than it does 1, I once was told. And he shone a light on my darkness. My soul was in a bad place. It was like soul surgery for me. And we sat down and we went through all my resentments, and each one, we looked at it where I was dependent on people. I do what I want for my own self-esteem. I was dependent on money from my mum. I was dependent upon all these things. And I looked at what harm I was doing to my parents, my family members, friends. I looked at my wrongs, and it stood out. 90% of mine, I'm embarrassed to say, they didn't do anything to me. You've seen the truth in it. And I've seen that, Jesus, I've got to tell people, a lot of people, I'm sorry. And I owed a lot of money. I was totally reliant on these people for my life, and I was sick, and I didn't know any other way to live. And he assured me, he goes, Rob, you're a sick person. You're not a bad person. He kept going over that with me. You're sick, Rob. The people that are in obsession to take a drink are insane. They're drinking against their own will. He goes, this is a treatment that will stop this, and it's up to you what you do with it on a daily basis. And we got to the end of my 5th step, and I felt like a lot of stuff was just gone. And that had started happening in my 4th step, and I went home and I left, and I won't go over what happened then because I'll be jumping on Tony stuff, and I'll share some stories. Step 10. I'm just joking, Darren. I'm not gonna. I'll start shooting from the hip in a minute, but no, trust. For me, trust. I had to learn a lot about resentment in my first 9 years of recovery. I'll give you the strong tip. I left a meeting one time, and 20 people I reckon I had resentments with when I got home. I rang my sponsor. I said, no one's sharing about the book. They're all talking absolute rubbish. He goes, did you write it out, Rob? I said, no. And I knew what was going to happen. All right, give me a call back later. I think, God almighty, man. And I'd write them out. I kept writing them out. I started to learn stuff with this inventory process where I was dependent on people to carry this message for my own self-esteem and pride. What about the newcomers? My fear was, I was resenting them because my fear was other people's welfare. They would relapse, and then I'd look at it and I'd think, hang on a minute here. Some of those people, they're just doing the best they can with what they know. Some of those people are nice people, they're not into this, they don't have to be into it. What about Rob stand up? Rob find the voice in all this. And I'd love to say that was the way it ended, but it wasn't. It was 9 years of trying to get my head around just that, continuously going back and continuously trying to be patient, tolerant, loving towards people, and trying to see the truth in Rob's own stuff, not what other people were doing, what I needed to do. And, it was a journey, which is I'm very grateful for today. Alcoholics Anonymous allows people to hang around and say whether people are whether they're angry, they're frightened, whether they whatever's happened. Some people storm out of meetings. And I think that's the good place, a safe place for people. Of course, you don't want to see that, but it happens every now and then. People get emotional. When I'm in resentment, my emotions are off the chart. When I'm in fears, my emotions are off the chart. You get me frightened enough, and I can react. That's just the way it is. And I need to work on this on a daily basis. So, I'll share a story. Trust for me is important. I was 2011. 13 years sober. Me and my partner. At the time, we tried to have a child. We had lost a couple. Got to 12 weeks, and there was no heartbeat. Had a couple of miscarriages. And we planned a trip to America. We thought, well, maybe we're not going to have a child. And she's not a member, and she got pregnant. And we went over to, she had to be back before she was 20 weeks, I think, at the time. I still went to America. We come back, so we're thinking she's going to lose this for sure. That's what I thought. And we got back, and we got to the time when it's right, and no one tells you about this stuff. Men's side, I didn't know what was going on with the pregnancy of a lady. I went along to a few of the things with my partner, like a few of the sessions you have to hold them, and, I wasn't listening, I was too worried about the car park. I just missed out on outside the hospital. And they're telling me all these things, and we get to you guys can relate to that, and we get to the time when she's just about to have the child, and she rings me and I leave work and I go home and pick her up. We head into the hospital, and it just was 10 hours later and she wouldn't dilate, and people were starting to panic. I could sense it, and it scared me. I was terrified, of what was happening. And the cord was wrapping around her neck in the womb, and I thought, come on, God. Man, I'm always helping you out with your kids in AA. I'm thinking that at the time. I'm thinking, this is it. This is what you get for believing in God. And anyway, then all of a sudden I could hear a thunderstorm in the distance. These two surgeons come burst in the door, Nikes, with gowns on, and bang, 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 bang. We're out. We're moving. Get a gown on him, and they've got a screen up in the bang. She's going to have a cesarean. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. No one tells you that at school. They certainly don't share that at ID meetings, No one pulls you aside and said, prepare for this. This could happen to you, Rob. Maybe you could, see what's going to go down. Look into this. You know what I mean? And I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that I didn't know what was going on. And I stood at the end, and I'm at the end of the screen, and I'm with Yvette, and I'm looking over, and I'm thinking, what the the hell is happening here? And then I could hear stuff, I could feel the vet moving, and then they pulled little Ruby out. Oh my God. I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I just wondered what was going on. And it's one of the most touching moments of my recovery, because they cut the cord and they put it down on a little tray, and the nurse goes, "Come over here, Rob." And Yvette's going, "Take photos, Rob, take photos," and I put my cameras down, and she goes, "Put your little finger out." She grabbed my hand, and Ruby's little hand grabbed it, and her eyes opened. Mate, I burst into tears. It just poured out of me. The reason I mention this story with this, because, I heard it last night at a meeting, someone mentioned it, resentment and fear, and, it's a separation for us. How can you love anything or anyone when you're in it? And 14, it took me that long, and I felt this overwhelming feeling in the room I just felt it. I felt it when I went through this process. I had a spiritual experience. And I recognised that God loves us all the same way. I was feeling that love for my daughter. He loves us all like that. I recognised that we're all the children of God after that, because the love I felt for the room filled up with that joy, and I just, man, oh man, I had to call her. Yvette goes, "We'll call her Ruby," and she goes, "What do you want the second name to be, Rob?" And I said, "Grace." She's our little gift from God. And it's just, people know me here, I just adore her. I just dote over her. And recently we sat down, she started high school, and she started at a school where her mum's family, beautiful people, and they've been involved in a church there. And so I love them being around there. And she's going to like a Christian school where her mum used to work in the soup kitchen years ago before it became a school, and she'd feed the homeless and that there. And I helped her. She goes, "Dad, I've got to put a tie on when I go to school. I don't know how to do it." And I'm thinking, whoa, that's what YouTube's for. I said to her, I know the feeling. I can ask this, I've shared a few times in the past, and you know what? I wouldn't have had a clue. And so we sat down together, and we went through it on YouTube, and she'd done her first little tie, and I showed her how to loosen it off, take it off, so she took it home with her. And it's those sorts of things that, I haven't got trust enough to know that the outcome's going to be okay. I never had that trust. I still suffer a bit of it, where I just don't think it's going to end up really good for me. Don't get me wrong, not everything ends up the way I want it. It never will. But the things where I'm doubting at that time, where I need to have that trust and just whatever happens, accept it, that it's God's plan in this world, that whatever happens, something good will come from it. It's meant to be at that time, because later on I'll know why. It's amazing experience, recovery, and workplace stuff to get opportunities we get. If I do this with you guys and I'm here and I sponsor people, do you know what? Someone asked me about this once. Is it some sort of miracle that happens? I see it all the time in heaps of members. Come in here destitute, down and out, and yet suddenly they're picked up and given a life out there beyond their wildest dreams. I see it all the time. And I said to someone, I don't know if it's any, with me, I don't know about other people, with me, it might be with them, with me, do you know what happens? While I'm here with you guys, while I'm sponsoring people, while I'm involved in our service structure, giving back, Rob doesn't interfere in everything. I get a clear mind. I get that peace of mind. I get that treatment. I ain't trying to make things happen. If I'm not here with yous, or I'm doing my own thing, it's just chaotic. It doesn't work for some reason. I don't know why. It just never did. It never worked. Even when I travelled around a bit, and that if I plan to go somewhere and there's a meeting there, I always see the things I really will need to see. Everything that I want isn't as good as, the things I'll get if I'm in that moment, that now, where I'm not thinking about, I'm not frightened of the future, I'm not going over the past, and I'm not reliving things that are just totally gone. There's nothing I can do about it. I may need to apologise, I may need to seek a difference in it, but I certainly, certainly need to be here with you guys. there's just a story. I'm not sure how much time I've got left. And it's the conduct. You know, the reason I'm sharing this stuff because sometimes we do our inventories. What do we get out of it? What's the payout at the end? What do we want out of it? You know, I think what we want out of it is not to be that person that's filled with anger and resentment and fear and ashamed of everything. That's what it does. I'll share a quick story and I'll finish up. My grandmother, 6 months sober, she'd had a stroke, and one of my amends to my grandfather, I said to my original sponsor, you know, like, how do I make an amends to a dead person? And he passed away, and I felt I let him down. And he said to me, write him a letter, Rob. Write him a letter. And we talked about 3 places you can do it. You go to, you know, like the cemetery, make it. Go to a somewhere you spend a lot of time with him, or do it in your house. And I thought, nah, I'm not doing it in my house. People can hear me talking to myself. You know, I'm nuts anyway. You know, I didn't want to go to the cemetery. Oh man, you know, this God thing. No doubt some sort of ghost or something will appear for me. You know, I think it's not a chance. Just joking, but and so I went to a place where he taught me how to fish. He taught me how to fish when I was a kid. And it's blocked off now. There's a power station now. It's an old wharf in Adelaide, in Port Adelaide, where I'm from. And I went down there and I wrote this letter, and you know, it said the things that we learn in our process, in our conduct inventory. It says in there what we should have done instead. And that's what I got shown to do, right? What you should have done instead in all your amends, because that's going to be like a blueprint for your life. And where I felt like I let him down. I felt like I wasn't the grandson he wanted. I put in there. I'm sorry. I felt I should have been the grandson that you should have had. I should have been there for you. You know, I should have loved you. You know, I was incapable of it. I was sick, chronic alcoholism. I didn't know it. And I went down and I read this letter and all these things, and nothing happened. There was no parting of the rivers or down there. There was none of that stuff. You know, like. And on the way down, they had those thoughts. Imagine if something like that happened. But, crazy stuff in that time when you... And, I read that letter. But then I walked home, and shortly after that, my grandmother had a stroke. And it left her paralysed, half her body. And she got put in a nursing home. And I started going there, and I started seeing her, and I got to know a few of the carers and the nurses there, and they get a hoist up in the end, and I'd take her for walks. They wanted me to take her out, and they put her in this abnormal sort of wheelchair and put a blanket on her, and I'd walk her down Semaphore in Adelaide. If anyone knows Semaphore, it's a beautiful place. And she grew up down there. And I'd take her down, I'd walk her all the time, and any chance I could get, and I'd go there. And that's when I first really started reading the Bible was there. I read a bit of the Bible with her, and in the end, 4 years after that, she finally passed away. And I looked back on that, and I reflected, and I realised that, you know, the letter to my grandfather, he would have loved that, but it was the usual thing for me to say, you guys, no, sorry for this, sorry for that. Just uncut it. He would have loved that I spent time with my grandmother because he wasn't there to do it. He would have loved that. That's the amends. That was the change in my conduct, in my behaviour. That's it. The actions that we take that change the way we refuel. That's what this stuff does. And it has done it immensely for me. It hasn't made me internally perfect, but it's given me a place where a lot of that deep refeeling left me. I was gone in that. And anyone in here that's ever been in that knows that deep refeeling. To come out of that, then you're left with, you know, our defects of character over a period of time, which no doubt Tony will explain brilliantly. And I won't go. I'll try not to go into it. As I said, you know, like the things that make me restless, irritable, discontented, resentment, fear, guilt, shame, the stuff I need to deal with. Listen, I feel very honoured to be here amongst you people, and thank you so much to the committee for putting this on. And I hope everyone has a great weekend and enjoyed this very much. Thank you so much for inviting me, guys.